Tardes para todos aquellos que nos siguen desde Filipinas. Buenos días para los amigos que nos siguen desde España y buenos días también, casi buenas madrugadas, diríamos, para los que nos están siguiendo desde Iberoamérica. La semana pasada, el día 23 de abril, se celebró en todo el mundo, se conmemoró la muerte de Miguel de Cervantes, también la de William Shakespeare y la del Inca Garcilaso de la Vega. Bueno, en realidad Miguel de Cervantes murió un 22 de abril, lo que pasa que le enterraron el 23 y por eso se conmemora el 23. Y Shakespeare en realidad es el 23 de abril, pero del calendario juliano. O sea, nosotros ahora utilizamos el calendario gregoriano, o sea que tampoco realmente Shakespeare murió el 23 de abril. Pero en cualquier caso, quizás sea el Inca Garcilaso, no tengo el dato exacto de qué hora falleció en Córdoba, pero quizás sea solo el Inca Garcilaso de estos tres grandísimos escritores quien falleció el 23 de abril. Pero en cualquier caso, es el 23 de abril, el día del libro, desde los años 20 del siglo pasado, desde los años 30, lo celebramos en todos los países de habla hispana y un poquito más adelante UNESCO declaró el Día Mundial del Libro. Pero además del Día Mundial del Libro, es también el Día de la Lengua Española, declarado por Naciones Unidas el año 2010 cuando decidió dedicar...
They decided to devote one day to one of the 6 official UN languages. You can understand that for Cervantes, this is a very important date. And if we kept that date as a referral, we've invited 4 persons who use the Spanish language or who have used the Spanish language as a tool, as a working tool. They are 4 diplomats, 4 ambassadors, 2 lady ambassadors, 2 men ambassadors, which now we already convey our welcome, and we'd like to thank them greatly that they devote some of their precious time to be with us. The
ambassador of Colombia to the Philippines, Marcela Ordóñez, as well as the ambassador of the Philippines to Portugal, who used to be Consul General of the Philippines in Madrid, who speaks marvelous Spanish.
The ambassador of Chile in the Philippines, Mr. Ambassador Rojas, who was with us on the Strait of Magellan. And we will also have Ambassador of Spain in the Philippines, Jorge Moragas. Well, with no further ado, and we would like to thank the presence of all of you, I would like to pose first question that would like to hear your views on. Let me see. The British have the Commonwealth, right? The French have the Francophonie. And with the Spanish, what do we have? What is that universe that we have? What's that constellation that brings us together to promote and advance our language? Who would you should take this opportunity? Ambassador Ordóñez.
That is a very good question. I think it is important to point out that in 1991, our heads of state created and held the first Ibero-American Conference. Its aim was to work together towards international cooperation. Now it counts on the participation of all the Latin American countries with a general secretariat. Plus, in Europe, there's Spain, Portugal, and Andorra. We are committed to protect a number of principles: the linguistic value, that is to preserve the Spanish and Portuguese languages, as well as to preserve the cultural value, mainly for the entire region, together with the historical, ethnic, and social patrimony. It's always good to be aware and to remind ourselves of this heritage, a patrimony that we would like to share with the others, which is the democracy, the sovereignty of our countries, our defense of human rights, all the fundamental rights that we have based on international law. On the other hand, there is also the idea of cooperation that is horizontal. This means that it is not just one country teaching the other countries, but we are all on the same level and we are sharing the same experiences with the aim of collaborating so that the other countries also learn. We have had a number of projects under the umbrella of CELAC, a name which I find a little funny, but I would like to share with you some stories. Like there is this project that is spearheaded by a group of young people fighting against poverty. Another group that focuses on developing science and technology. So the scientists talk among themselves, they discuss research. And another group centers on productivity, economic systems, political and social systems. There's also a group of craftsmen or artisans who come together to protect their common interests, and several other groups to discuss South-South cooperation to systematize their practices, their ways of doing things. There is always a challenge. And of course, it is easier to count on the help, the experiences of other countries because of our common particular characteristics. So Javier, I think the answer is here in this cooperation that we have.
Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador. Yeah, it's a cute name, that Pita. I had never heard of it, to be honest. It's a cute name. And now, Ambassador Rojas, I think, wants to add something. Please, Mr. Ambassador. Well, first of all, I'd like to greet all of you. It's really a pleasure to be in this roundtable. I wish to greet my colleague, fellow ambassadors, and of course, the ambassador of the Philippines in Portugal. And thank you to Instituto Cervantes for this opportunity to interact with you. It's very interesting. And I'd like to want to mention something which is extraordinary, which has very much linked with the Philippines, you know, and talking about the use of the Spanish language. During making Spanish official language in the United Nations, in order to make it one of official languages, it was based on an initiative and a project that was spearheaded by the Philippines, interestingly. And since then, Spanish became an official language, one of the 6 of the UN system. Nowadays, the contribution, extraordinary contribution of the work that is the framework of the United Nations guarantees the fact that we Spanish-speaking can access to all the documents of the system and that the language. And I want to recognize, and in the context of this commemoration of the Day of Spanish, that this initiative was spearheaded by Spain, the Philippines. Well, that's fantastic. It's a very important historical data, and we always said, and it's there, and you can see it in my up there behind me. It says that Spanish is part of my culture. It's part of my heritage. So while it may not be an official language, it is part and parcel, absolutely part of parcel history, identity, and it is true. I think it's very true what you have just reminded us, that the Philippines was in that in the forefront of that proposal to make Spanish one of the 6 official languages of the United Nations. Anything you'd like to add, regarding that first observation. Ambassador Ordóñez has been very clear about it. If they had Francophony, we have said it. So we're at par with the Brits and with the French. Madam Feria or Ambassador Moragas, want to add something? Everything has been said. What else can I add? Very well. In that case, what would you say to a young Filipino who wants to be a diplomat like you are, that wants to work and represent his country, or any international institution, organizations? How would you convince him or her to study Spanish and to be proficient and make the Spanish a tool for his work? Who is the very person who takes on this challenge? Well, if you don't mind. Ambassador, please go ahead. Well, first of all, I want to greet you, Javier. I'm here in Cebu. I am here in Cebu participating in the commemoration of the 500th anniversary of the travel around the world. And the episodes that took place is wonderful and beautiful city that I know meant the death of Magellan, but it also, since then, the Spanish fleet was commanded, that completed the fleet fell on the shoulders of a Spanish civil, no less than Juan Sebastian Elcano, that who, for the record, 500 years completed the travel around the world. I want to greet all, especially, of course, my fellow ambassadors here, Claudio, Ambassador of Chile in the Philippines, Marcela, Ambassador of Colombia in the Philippines, and especially to Cookie Feria, later brothers in Portugal of the Philippines, our beloved Portugal. The response, and I want to be too lengthy in this, I'll say the following. Spanish language is considered, without sounding like a chauvinist, it is a global language. There are about almost close to 600 million persons, and that is present in 4 continents. In Europe, definitely with Spain, but also in Andorra, and of course in Latin America, also in Africa, Equatorial Guinea, of course in Latin America, with some 22 nations use the language, with all the power that Latin America brings, and also Asia in a more humble way in this wonderful country called the Philippines. Yes, some Spanish is spoken. It may not be a foreign language, but and you know what's interesting? It has some variants, interpretations in some local languages, like Chabacano, which is very much spoken in Zamboanga, in Mindanao, and in some other parts of our, like Cavite. So first, it's a universal language. It's global. Second, as Claudio said, and I didn't know that fact, and I want to thank him that there was that the Philippines was at the forefront. That's awesome. I know that the Philippines was a founding member of the United Nations. I didn't know that it went as far as pushing for Spanish. But before being assigned to the Philippines, I was lucky enough to be ambassador of Spain before the United Nations in New York. And as they used to say, well, it is in great comparative advantage, thanks to the Philippine initiative, that it's brought to official language and a working language, not only official and like Ambassador Claudio said, because all the documents have to be translated in those, like in this case, the Spanish language. So we're speaking of a most important multilateral institution that any diplomat that you've asked would be no, because he or she is bound to be that. It is a working language, an official language in the most important international organization of the world. Second, there's another important data that we should not forget. The Spanish language is a recent phenomenon. The first, second language in the US, and today in the United States, there are more Spanish speaking than in Spain. I mean, there are more Spanish speaking in the U.S. than in home space. So it's an intangible. If we call the Hispanic USA, could be another country, we could say, although not officially a nation. So as a culturally and professionally, it could be very useful to know Spanish when you live in the U.S. And well, the long and short, if you are a diplomat, I think to be able to speak the language would be an incredible comparative advantage, a powerful tool that you would make your work much easier. It is also the third most important language on internet, which is the medium where we exist, and that shows how important it is. And on the economic side, there are sectors where Spanish is very important as an important asset. For example, the business processes outsourced to the Philippines. Those persons who work in the BPO and who speak in English, covering the American language, the US language, for example, if they speak Spanish, they have they have a premium, and they can earn further if they speak that, because they would be attend to the clientele in the United States that wishes to speak in Spanish. And again, we're talking about several million. We're talking about 60 million people in the US speak Spanish. So those are the assets, I think, that we could share of our language that could be very interesting for a young Filipino diplomat that has one sort. And as far as literature, culture, what can I say? And music, mind you, music has a certain beat, and it's a leading beat. And you know, musical expression, popular music expression nowadays is done largely in Spanish. So these are many avenues and many hues in this spectrum of colors for a young diplomat, if he is or she is familiar with it. Have I answered your question, Javier? Well, thank you so much. And after that presentation and some motivating and a passionate, I said tomorrow the number of enrollees in Cervantes will go up and to the ceiling. As we say, you know, we, the Latinos, Mediterranean people, the Philippines are the Latins of Asia. And I honestly believe that there is much more fun here than in other countries of the neighborhood. I'm sorry for our neighbors, but in the Southeast Asia, nobody has fun and nobody parties like the Filipino, and that's because there's Latis. You know, we feel so close to you. I wish to avail of this opportunity to tell our audience that they may pose their questions through our to our panelists through that app that has Zoom. At the bottom of your page, there's it says question answers Q&A. You write it down, and at the end, we will be happy to forward the last 15 minutes. We will pose this question. We will dish these questions, those that we have can entertain, to our panelists. Well, now let's move into something a bit different. I think you are really, it's amazing that your skills at the Spanish language. But let me tell you, in what moment of your life, your professional career, did it dawn on you how important it was to speak Spanish? Who wants to answer? I knew it. It's going to be our ambassador, Feria.
Good morning from Lisboa, and then good evening in the Philippines and Spain and other countries. First of all, thank you, Javier, for this opportunity. I thought it's a little bit strange that I am invited here, because as ambassador to Portugal, it's Portuguese that we actually, that's what we speak, Portuguese. But then This speaks a lot about my stay in Spain a few years ago. But then I would like them to take advantage to greet the ambassador Moragas and the rest of the ambassadors. So to the question, at what moment did you think that I needed to study Spanish? Well, it was in 2002 that I was appointed to work in Spain, and I was working in the consulate, and then I started in the diplomatic school, and there was a scholarship that I took advantage of the ISC, Agencia Española. And there I really thought that I needed to learn well Spanish. And for me, it wasn't that easy at first. But then practicing with colleagues and watching TV, the news. Well, when I arrived in Spain, I didn't know that it was going to be that difficult. I thought I already knew Spanish, but then when I arrived in Spain, I didn't understand anything. But then little by little, I got the rhythm of the Spanish, the language. And it was then that I thought I had the facility little by little to talk with my colleagues and to learn Spanish. So in 2002, when I needed to, of course, to call the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or to make some consultations, so I had to convert my work into something so simple, but so I needed to really communicate with the Spanish in meetings, for instance, with other embassies in Madrid. And I realized that everybody spoke Spanish. And so the advantage of a diplomat in order to speak Spanish, and it's enormous. So that is first to understand and to be able to explain things and to communicate with the Spanish authorities. It seemed so little, but then it is a an ability, it's a skill that is very useful and important for a diplomat. Also, like personally, to be able to speak Spanish, it offers a fan of opportunities to be able to participate in a world that is completely different with new ideas, new flavors, new feelings and experiences. It opens doors to so many things. For instance, Spanish films, magazines, books, and to many other things. So it's true, at first it was difficult for me, but like any other thing, it's nothing is really easy. In fact, right now, still with the grammar, I still have some slips. But what is important is to be able to communicate ideas with colleagues, and for a diplomat, it is to establish a network of contacts, and that the fact that I was in Spain for 10 years between 2002, 2008, 2009, and 2012. Then when I returned to the Philippines, so I was uh, the, with the protocols of the president, I had to speak with the delegates. I was even there for the visit of the Holy Father. I was the first one, the officer from the Philippines, in order to go up the plane to talk with the Holy Father. And I spoke to him in Spanish. And from then on, every time he would see me, he would even greet me because he remembered that I was that lady who spoke in Spanish. So for me, after so many years of in the ministry using Spanish, I think I have arrived at this point in my life that I'd say I'm so delighted to have learned Spanish. And I would like to advise this to Filipinos to take advantage of those scholarships. There are many scholarships at the Instituto Cervantes and other embassies that they give to Filipinos, and we have to take advantage of this, because it's that experience that you have 1,000 lives, because you speak Spanish, you speak English, and in my case I speak Portuguese and French. It is something important in order to fulfill a life that is more complete.
Awesome. Awesome what you've said. You speak perfect Spanish, and it was someone who had to be with us. Ambassador, I understand you want to add something. Thank you. I want to make a quick comment to what that Jorge and Celia just said. There's something very unique that we have to rescue when we're speaking about the origin of the question that you posed. How to incentivate or motivate a Filipino. Here, they can be in touch with this panel with 4 career diplomats. And as such, as professional diplomats, I think that they all make a significant contribution to the development and the welfare of their country and their countrymen. And to have a familiar in a certain language, to speak a foreign language, in this case Spanish, for those colleagues of mine who are Filipinos who want to join the foreign services and international relations, I honestly think that they have an incredible comparative advantage. And I want to highlight 2 things. One, that has to do with what Jorge said earlier, with the number of nations in the whole world that who use Spanish language. And second aspect, which is also significant, is that we have to be aware that nowadays, and also from a Philippine point of view, a country in the Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific, there is a challenge to be take charge of the interaction in globalization. And I think that it's interest of the Philippines in their foreign policy and the economic trade and diversify markets, that they can able career diplomats that can speak Spanish and with a business language. I think I'd like to rescue that. Trade is very important, so we have to. I hope that the Philippines has a group of professional diplomats who are trade diplomats who speak Spanish. Oh, thank you so much, Ambassador. Ambassador, in fairness, Ambassador Celia, is there something you can? I'm sure you can say. Why was it to speak with the Pope, no less? I mean, that's quite a good argument. That is an awesome and a priceless asset value. And also with Ambassador Ordóñez, when we were preparing this session, she mentioned, share with this that in the diplomatic world, there are many countries, like Ambassador Moragas, who said 21, 22 in the, and in many assignments, you already have many colleagues who with whom you can have a more familiar language beyond the work language. Is pleasant. It's nice to be in a diplomatic community where you meet many Spanish speakers. I mean, I have been working in assigned to many places. Then I remember you go out and unwind and you meet others who speak Spanish in that circle of the diplomatic corps. And that's, you know, it sounds like a trivial, but I think it's very, very important. It makes you less lonely when you're away from your country of origin, and to make many friends in many. I think that's something very, very helpful. Well, if it's fine with you, anything you want to say about what we've spoken so far, I want to add something. I have to, if you allow me. Please, Ambassador, go ahead. I was seeing in the chat some of the comments, some observations and the remarks, and there is one that has triggered this second participation of mine, which I'll be brief. And going to, but why would it be interesting for a Filipino to value the knowledge or the study of Spanish language, it is to make it keep it so short, because whatever is Spanish is part and parcel of what is to be a Filipino. It is part of your idiosyncrasy. It is part, for example, the great national hero, Jose Rizal, would share his views and his art and his great his novels, Fili and Noli, and great poems in Spanish. Your national hero would speak in Spanish, and a wonderful Spanish, I must say. The Filipino, and I will go in Tagalog, that I know, but it's true in the Visayas. It is composed by like 3,000 words that can trace it from Spanish. So it is a way that you are actually learning something that's yours, nothing alien. It is integrated in your language. Many words, many terms come from Spanish. So maybe that's a leverage that makes it easier for you to understand, because as Ambassador Feria said, you know, some languages are difficult. Of course, it's hard to learn Spanish, but when you the returns are priceless. So the conclusion is the Spanish language is part and parcel of the Philippine identity of Filipinos, and not to mention the surnames, the streets and the towns. It's totally integrated in your identity. Of course, it's dominated by the English, but it's in the base of the Philippines. And you know, every time I go around, I discover a word that if you see it is, if you the etymology is Spanish, and I love it because the Filipinos are unaware. You know, sometimes I sometimes mention to my Filipino friends and did you notice that paciencia, it comes from paciencia, or the trabajo, or guapa, or guapo? There are incredible number of words that the Filipinos are not aware that hail from Spanish. So to learn Spanish by a Filipino, it's easier because they already have a hidden vocabulary. They have their glossary, and they're not aware of it. I just wanted to add that.
If I may add something, during my stay in Spain, for example, I met many Filipinos who worked in Spain. And once I called up at the house of a friend, looking for a friend, and it was a lady who answered, so I left a message. And then I asked her, please repeat what the message, the number that I gave, and said 126. It was like she already got a different type of Spanish. It's supposed to be seis. No? Another time, I was just leafing through the dictionary of the Real Academia. I saw some words in Filipino from RAI. For instance, nipis, or a few other words that I remember. For instance, nipis and many other words. And there was also a comment of a colleague from Germany. She said, here in the chat box, she says, can you please share some ways in order that we can reconnect with the Spanish culture? Because right now, there is a lot of interest in the Japanese culture, Korean culture, because of it seems to be so popular right now. But I don't know how we can also reconnect with the Spanish culture. Well, right now, I'd like to say that many Filipinos during the COVID, many people are just watching the K-novelas, the Korean novelas. So it's like opening another world, which was difficult to understand. It's difficult to understand Korean because it's a different language, a different culture. But through Netflix, because of the movies, Spanish films, Latin films in Spanish, and of course with the Instituto Cervantes, it's also offering so many films weekly. I think that is one way by which the Filipinos can be made to interested to learn Spanish. And now with all the tools that we have, the mobile phones in any place, and even on the streets, walking at home, wherever, it's so accessible. It's easier right now to learn Spanish, through films, through music in Spanish.
Indeed, that's very true. And now that thanks to the segue of I want to say that our courses in Cervantes are online. So anywhere in the Philippines or in the world, you can sign in. You can learn Spanish through online. Aside from the movies that we share every week, I want to greet Teresa Dizon, our lead ambassador, for connecting, and also ambassador of the Philippines, de Vera in Brussels, who is following us. Thank you so much. You must be doing very well because the number of participants is going great. It's the high. We're getting great feedback. That means that the following, the public is very much interested in this conversation, this webinar on the significance of the Spanish language in international relations and in many other fields. What I said, Ambassador Feria, what came to mind, Baguio or Baguio, which is also a Filipino word, and that is brought into the Spanish language. In fact, there's a study of a good friend of us, Rafael Rodriguez Ponga. He's a linguist who loves the Philippines. He has an article published on this word, what is brought into the Spanish language. Well, let's go on sharing these topics. And now let me be a bit more formal, maybe a bit more academician, if you said. I don't know if this is very provoking or I don't, please take it lightly. I'd like to your comment on this. The Spanish nation, like the Republic of on the 19th century, on the post-imperial or post-colonial, like part and parcel that has broken up of a larger thing, which is the monarchy. With the loss of the empire, Spain makes declared its own independence. I have not said that. It is something said by a person from academe called in Pedophobia of Mr. Roca, that has become a bestseller. What do you think of the fact that a statement that Spain broke away from itself when it lost empire? You know, when they say Spain as our mother Spain, it makes you a bit uncomfortable. If you say sister Spain, okay, because I think we are all children of the same trans. And with your knowledge of language, what would you say in this regard? May I? Yes, please. Please share your views. I know your training in economics is very good. I'm sure you're most gifted to answer this. And I'd really like to, I love the structure of this webinar. If you allow me, I'd like to present it, to frame it from a Chilean perspective. And also, it's a provoking question. And I want to be a provocateur myself. In this regard, I see it from a historical point of view in the context of what Chile is and has been. And it's and the first thing I'd like to say, I say 3 segments that can respond to your question, Javier. In what sense would you say? Well, I think there's another phenomenon associated to the Spanish reality, which is a constitutional democracy, but I do it from the Chilean historical perspective. And why is it so important to say so? Because it's a phenomenon that brings all Latin America together. We have an incredible cultural identity, but the phenomenon that starts in 1810 and other blooms all the way to 1820, 1830s is different compared to what happens in the Philippines. In Latin America, the president of Spain, there's a lot of they're Creoles, there's a lot of mixed blood, there's a lot of intermarriages. So there's a great number of population who is built, structured on the Spaniards who arrived to America and marry locally. So there's a common, in all those processes, there is a common structure, which is a very advanced process headed by Creoles, by mestizos, or Spaniards who had recently arrived to the colonies of that and participated in the struggle for emancipation or independence. And it's amazing, it's very interesting that many of our national heroes fought against the French invasion. And the extraordinary element that libertarian movement in Chile is related to trade, and that the colonies were looking to have a self-determination on a commercial point of view, because before you could only deal with the metropole. But at that time, remember, the ruler was a Bonaparte. So there is a beginning of this independent movement. Now, what is interesting of this period is in the social structure that comes about, we replicate the Spanish institutionalism in a sense that how societies are organized, always with the Spanish language as the lingua franca, especially in the case of Chile. You know, there were native language, the autochthonous languages were hardly spoken among the Creoles. But this is social structure, economic and political. It's replicated from the colonial time. What changes is who is managing, who's in charge. And now it's run by the locals. And something is very important is that in that design, something that it defines us in the future, this is the role of the Catholic Church. That language identity, that cultural identity, and that religious identity frames us. And those elements are shared in Spain and in Latin America and in the Philippines. This is the first element. But related to this, I think that one has to understand current times with what was happening in Spain at that time, which was the wars of for the succession of the crown of the pro Carlos and pro Isabel, and that is an incredible long process of battles. I won't teach the Spaniards about it; they know perfectly what I'm talking about. But it has consequence in as far as the exercise of the imperial power and the kind of empire that is takes place in a very important internal issue. The empire decays as there's a fractious Spain in civil war. And then, of course, there's the Spanish-American War. And what in essence was, what did I say? it was a brief incident, but incredible impact in the geopolitical strategy of the times. And why is that important? Because there is a new development that, which is the power of the North Americans, of the US in the Philippines. And what does that mean in the Philippines? The imposition of a new culture, a new set of values, a new government. And in that process, the Spanish language, again, is dissolved from the ruling class, but to a certain extent only, because the elite of the Philippines and the Creole or the Mestizo elite keeps and maintains the Spanish language, and sometimes as an official language. And there are newspapers and radio programs in Spanish until they got the independence in 1946. So there is also a loop of cause effect that are brought about by the vacuum of power that happens in Spain with the Civil War, the reduction of the imperial presence, the loss of their colonies when they are defeated by the US, has an incredible impact and demotes the Spanish language to a second level. This is the second aspect. And the third thing I'd like to share and highlight, but and very, very important to mind, that in the 20th century is that our nations, actually, we have a very Eurocentric view. The economic, political elite of Chile looks into Europe and Spain particularly as a reference point. And in that process, that Eurocentric vision of the Chileans, we have also seen it from a political point of view. And there are things that happen even the political movements that take place in Spain have influenced the Chilean politics and the institutional development. And there is a very interesting conjuncture which is associated with a historical event which is definitive, that had an effect, an extraordinary effect to the development of our economic and cultural of Chile. That in some moment, for a terrible drama like a Spanish Civil War, Pablo Neruda, great poet and diplomat, was the person responsible the great mission to host bring the Winnipeg, that allowed us as Chileans to be solid in solidarity with a group of Spaniards who were a difficult situation. But there was a criteria. So those chosen that would go in that Winnipeg, that vote to Chile, were persons educated, skilled, technicians, artisans. So what happened? That group of the Winnipeg made an incredible contribution to the development, economic development, social and political of Chile. Amazing, awesome. And it was a game changer. It changed the national industry. And many of those persons who arrived on the Winnipeg actually built a new political reality for Chile. And many of their children have become extraordinary political leaders, totally identified with the Spanish Chile, but always linked and with Spain. And we go with the last and third language, which is also very interesting. The comparative processes, which is the phenomenon of economic, social, and political that there was in Spain during the transition with the president of Adolfo Suarez and what came after it, with the normalization process and democratic in Chile when the military rule came to an end of General Pinochet. And then there was a perfect coordination, sync in the relationship between Chile and Spain, and in many ways, and allowed maintaining that link, the substantial link of that common shared urban community of identities and values and culture. There was a comparative process wherein we have actively participated in the development on a very tense and a wide relation with Spain. Nowadays, Spain, and since the 90s, has been one of the main investment for investors in Chile. And if you go to Chile and you see the public infrastructure, the highways, it's like you are seeing the same design of the 30s in Madrid, because they were built by multinational sponsors that have participated in these public works with a great impact in Chile. So that continuity, what I want to go is to the essence of it. I firmly believe that the construction of the independence of Spain from herself is not a product only, necessarily a single reason. It is a whole process, a wide process of many corrections you mentioned. And obviously that start with an internal matters, but in that process, and that may be unique in this exercise, Latin America, how it relates with Spain and the use of the language, is that in the birth of our countries in Latin America, there was active participation of the ways things were done. We were heirs to what the things, when we were sometimes replicated, and that's something that has been true in the future and until today. I was a Consul General of Chile in Madrid in 2009 and 2010, and in that process, I was, for example, to address thousands of Chileans with a program done by Zapatero, working with the migrants, the Chilean, and there was a significant number of Chileans who migrated to Spain because of employment opportunities. So, and I will not take this point any longer. In the case of Chile, and Jorge is fully aware of this because he has incredible network of friendship with Chileans, very important. This is a continuous process of bilateral, the use of Spanish, walking hand in hand. And we have many historical convergence. We have supported each other. Of course, we've had the differences. We've had some discrepancies internationally. During Prime Minister Snar, we had issues. But we have been able to construct a basic understanding that leads what you said. And I think it's true of what Marcela was saying regarding the Latin American summits. Nowadays, it is a horizontal, egalitarian, but obviously heir to the exposure to the Spanish culture during centuries, and particularly the last 3 decades. Thank you, Ambassador. Javier, may I add something? Of course, Ambassador Moragas. I know that he devoted part of his life to politics, so I'm sure it is a very, very valid opinion what he has to share. I wanted simply agree and support in the same language, not in the same place, with Claudio and what he just said, that the Spanish trajectory in that period. The 19th century of Spain, you're totally right, Claudio, when you mention that the distortion that has on the empire, or what was left of it in the 19th century, the breaking up of Spain, the civil wars of Spain, really weakened that idea that that 19th century Spain that is dragging between support of King Charles or the Prince Charles and the liberals. That leads to the dependence of the Philippines. And mind you, the Proclamation of Independence is many times done in Spanish. In the Katipunan and the Independence is written in Spanish and said in Spanish. And that is something that many Filipinos are unaware of. But I have discovered or rediscovered. And I think it's an incredible value. And I, supporting what Claudio said, there is a social engineering process of a new empire, a new superpower that was positioning itself, introducing itself to the international world, was against Spain, a decadent power at that time. And the United States picks on us. And for the first time, it's the first time they fight a foreign power against Spain in 1898. In 1898, I'm sorry. And that does not means that Spain has to flee the archipelago, and a frustration of the Philippine, I'm sorry, independence, and with a new neo-colonial power or colony 2.0 that eradicates or uproots the Spanish identity in the Philippines. It was there in arts, in music, in literature, in politics, in trade, and it suddenly uprooted. I mean, the Filipino politicians and presidents spoke Spanish, but suddenly all this is uprooted. Dramatic. The Americans did it very well. You know, that uprooting of that language, the Spanish language, and the introduction of new values and a new language, they did very carefully, cautiously, but also with but those roots are there. They were not able to pull out all the roots, and I am really awed to see Feria as a wonderful diplomat. She speaks so many languages so well, but it's so beautifully how I can see a Spanish woman a Filipino woman to speak Spanish so well. Well, and the last thing I'd like to say is, and these are my parting words, and I will say it in Spanish. I do it with a lot of love to Marcela, to Cookie. Can I call you Cookie, Ambassador? I'm sorry. Can I call you Cookie? And my dear friend Claudio, and to you, Javier. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for joining us from Cebu. I know that you have a very busy month over there. Thank you. And the quote that triggered this provocative question that Ambassador Claudio answered so well, that with the loss of the empire, Spain declared its own independence, is Juan Antonio Ortega. It is quoted by Roca in Imperiophobia. But to be honest, it was Ortega who said, was Juan Antonio Ortega. Well, now let us go to questions from our participants. Ambassador Marcela Ordóñez, please, you wanted to say something. We would have want to hear you more. And the Colombians are known for the ones who speak Spanish best. So please let us entertain us with the Colombian way of speaking Spanish.
Thank you, Javier. I wanted to go back to what you said a while ago when you did that last question, when we use the word motherland, or we talk about our fraternal friends. I would like to take advantage to talk about in 1992 no, 1942, when we're talking about close in quotation marks, the discovery of America. We would like to talk about it as the encounter of two worlds. so it must be the same thing for the Philippines, because it's how we cannot talk about a superior culture that then goes into a new civilization, because the Philippines had a very um, good, wonderful civilization. It's always wonderful to think about the wonderful values that there are even before the coming of a new group. For instance, in Colombia, we talk about in Sierra Nevada, because they still continue to speak about their um, older brothers vis-a-vis the younger brothers, because we cannot understand, or we don't know how to accept, that we there are two different cultures. We cannot talk about we have to solve, that that communion, that collaboration, and we have to realize the efforts, economic, social, in the social sphere. I think that is the only way that we can talk about the collaboration in a long range.
Thank you so much for this very important observation. We have to come to an end, but as I said, I want to include some of the questions of the audience. For example, Daniela Gil Sevilla of Mexico, and I want to greet the ambassador of Mexico in the Philippines, who was invited, but he is on holidays. He's a great friend of ours, and I'm sure that soon, very soon, we will do shared activities with him. Ma'am Danielle Hill says that there are words like chocolate and aguacate are now, which are part of Spanish and part of Filipino language. There is an important study by Paloma Albala of the indigenous language of South America have in the part of the Pacific, in Asia. And there are words that come from the autochthonous language of the Americas. And she makes a question: what is the future of Spanish with its more interaction with English and Mandarin? Who wants to answer this? For a friend from Mexico. Go ahead. Just a minute. This is very important. A question from Mexico. And I think we should be aware and recognize the role of Mexico, and something that you know very well. We have a great friend and colleague from Mexico that made a very exhaustive decision on the galleon of Manila. And then with that, you can unearth that in that world of Spain, Mexico and the Philippines were connected. So there's a whole interaction. So that's how the Filipinos borrow words from the Mexican indigenous people and vice versa. Let's remember that colonization, for lack of a better word, was done through Mexico. And that study of Gautama Myanmar is very important. And it is important we quote him, and we should remind what he shares. That was the axis of interaction, the trade, the first global interaction of Asia, America, and Europe. That and the hinge or the axis, the central point, or was Mexico, from the Philippines to Mexico and to the Iberian Peninsula. I think I was there. And sorry for interrupting and breaking in. No. That I'm glad that you quote Gautama, a friend of ours who's been invited a number of times for the Cervantes, and who is working very hard and doing incredible studies on Southeast Asia. where he lives nowadays, to bring together the two sides of the Pacific as they were linked by the galleon. Ambassador Marcela, I think you were going to add something in this regard, or about that interaction of Spanish with English and with Chinese. They say, I don't know how much. Interesting viewpoint. What can you say? So is it Spanglish, or what's going to be Mandirañol or Español?
Thank you, Javier. Just simply to say that languages is it's a phenomenon that is alive because it grows. Like here, there is this Taglish because it's the same. There are many Spanish words in our language, in this language here in the Philippines. So it's going to be the same. So there are many words that come, and it's part of that evolution because of the internet. So it's going to continue developing, changing, like everything that has got some, because they get a little bit of but we know that a language will always come from its roots. It has its own roots, but then it will keep changing because of the contamination or getting a lot of words from other languages through interaction.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid we've got to wrap it up. Well, I want some comments that Ambassador Vega that was telling our guest. But Filipinos are very much Asians, but of course they're heirs to many Latin traditions, values, and their idiosyncrasy. I think that Ambassador De Vega is very important. You've not been very long, but you've been enough in the Philippines. Ambassador almost a year, some less, Ambassador Ordóñez. But I think you realize by now, you can identify, despite the COVID that has isolated, has confined, we can interact as much and enjoy the hospitality and the social life of the Filipinos. Ambassador Feria, right? That draws us all. Let's hope that the COVID is past so you can enjoy of the Philippine hospitality and that the quality of social life here. Anyway, I'd like to thank the questions of other colleagues. Unfortunately, there's no more time. They are. I know that some people are saddened by the loss of Spanish language. Either interventions to make. We're working hard with the Department of Education, and I'd like to thank the effort by the Department of Education. In a number of years, the number of professors of Spanish language have increased, and languages offered in the high school system. And we are working to advance it even further, so that the young generations have Spanish as a second language. Of course, we would love to be able to have many more Cervantes all over the Philippines. That's an aspiration that we all have. And that's something that Cookie knows well. We have internet and we can reach any corner of the archipelago, right? Anyhow, little as to add, unless you have any parting words, 2 minutes at most, because we're going on to overtime. And mind you, this is recorded and we can be downloaded it. If we make it too long, maybe our central servers will not be able to host it. So if anybody wants to know any parting words of any of you, please do so now. Maybe Ambassador Feria, we have not heard you for some time. You may want to say the closing words.
Thank you very much, Javier, for this opportunity to be able to participate in this webinar or conference, so however you call it. Well, and also to be able to express myself in Spanish after a long time, after that scholarship that was given to me by ISC, after 36 years in the Department of Foreign Affairs. And that's my success story. here also in Portugal. Of course, I have also had a chance to speak in Spanish with my colleagues, with ambassadors here in Lisbon, and also people from Colombia, and a lot of women from Cuba, from Paraguay, and of course from Spain. So I already have that chance in order to practice. So to be able to speak Spanish is something fantastic. It opens to a world. It opens to worlds. That for a diplomat, for any person, that is very important. I have a son who's 28 years old. He studied in Spain. So I'm a mother who is super delighted to have a son who speaks Spanish. So I have already done my job and my duty in order to foster, in order to promote Spanish. And so for all those who are participating in this conference, I hope you grab this opportunity in order to speak Spanish. And thank you to Instituto Cervantes and the Embassy of Spain in the Philippines and all the embassies of Latin American countries. And if you can offer that opportunity to learn Spanish. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You speak very good Spanish, and I'm impressed you don't speak Portuñol. Anyway, thank you to all. Thank you, Ambassador Moragas. We know you have many commitments, and thank you to Ambassador Ordóñez, Ambassador Rojas. Honestly, that when you came to visit the Instituto, an institutional visit, that is an honor and something that really touches me. And this is your house. This is the house of Spanish language. Anybody who speaks or loves Spanish language. And thank you to all those here to follow us, all the participants in the Philippines, in Spain, in Latin America. Thank you. Mabuhay. See you very soon. We're always together. Ciao.
Hola.
Hola.
Hola. Hola.
Hola.
Learning Spanish is fun. In fact, hindi natin napapansin, we use countless Spanish words every day.
We engage in active interaction with our professors. Sobrang effective na teaching strategies nila kahit naka-online class na.
Instituto Cervantes ofrece cursos de español en línea para todos los niveles.
Ang Spanish ang pinakamadanihon na sinultihan aron sa pagkat-on. Daghang salamat sa mga online nga mga kurso sa Instituto Cervantes. Naka-enroll na ko karon dinhi sa Mindanao.
Well, Spanish gets more valuable in the cyberspace every day. Hindi talaga ako nagkamali sa online program ng ICM. I owe my future successes to their excellence.
Spanish is an easy language to get committed to. Nos encanta el español.
Mesa, hombros, rodillas, pies. I never imagined that the virtual activities of Instituto Cervantes can be this fun and exciting, even when just in front of screen. Ónate a nosotros. Será divertido.
Let's learn and embrace our passion for the Spanish language.
Normalmente, dependiendo de España, pero también habla de las...
Let's learn Spanish wherever we are.
¿A qué esperas?
Hurry! Run now and visit our website.
See you online!